Hello and welcome to our second workshop in the VIP Professional Development Communications series. We're so excited to have you here today, and this topic is so relevant and so important to our employers and to success in your internship and your career, whatever that might be or wherever that takes you. I'm just delighted to introduce our speakers today. First of all, my name is Wendy Winter-Cersei. I'm with the Career Center, and we have some amazing speakers from our counseling center that are here. And first of all, I want to introduce Ami Ortiz. He's a clinical intern in our counseling center. And also Kristen Williams is a university counselor. So I will turn it over to you all, and thanks for being here and contributing.
Thank you, Wendy. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our workshop. Today, we're going to talk about expressing yourself in the workplace. My name is Ami Ortiz, and with me is Kristen, and we're both representative of the Counseling Center, as Wendy mentioned. So, just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to discuss ways to increase healthy communication. Practice active listening. We're going to talk about nonverbal communication and what that is. We're going to talk about stress and its impact on communication. We're going to talk also about boundaries and self-advocacy, professional emails, and then lastly, we're going to kind of sum everything up with a scenario that we're going to present to you and ask our participants to answer some questions regarding that scenario. All along, please feel free to ask questions if any come up, if it's in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask a question, please feel free to do that. So healthy communication, before I even dive into that, I want to acknowledge that interpersonal communication is a skill that comes more naturally to others to some than others. Just like athletics, math, the sense for cooking, all these are skills that we could develop as we practice them throughout our lives. Just self-disclosure, I personally used to really struggle with interpersonal communication. I remember in college, I really used to struggle with speaking to people who were, I guess, higher than me in the hierarchy of power. For example, professors, bosses, even parents of my friends. I used to break a sweat and get really nervous when talking to people who were older than me and things like that. And I think throughout time, as I exposed myself to those situations more, I did improve, and I'm always trying to improve myself more in that aspect. And I think even people who find themselves to be very good at interpersonal communication in different settings still need improvement in different areas. So throughout life, there are going to be a lot of situations where our buttons get pushed, we feel emotional, or we need to function under stress. So finding ways to effectively communicate in those moments can be crucial. So here are some tips to increasing healthy communication, both in the social and professional settings. So the first one is finding the right time. If something is bothering you, and you feel like you'd like to have a conversation about it, it'd be helpful to find the right time to talk to the other person about it. This should be during a time where both parties are calm, there are no apparent distractions, and it could be helpful to consider scheduling a time to talk about these matters in the event that both parties are busy. The next is talking face-to-face. It's helpful to avoid talking about serious matters or issues in writing. Also, speaking with the other person face-to-face can help us avoid any miscommunications that could come up. If you're having trouble collecting your thoughts, consider writing them down ahead of time and even reading them out loud to the other party when you do have the conversation. The next is trying to listen without countering. This is something I struggle with personally too. Try to actively hear the other person's point of view. Ask yourself, if you're actively trying to come up with your response before the other person is even done speaking, Are you really listening? The next one is trying not to attack the other party. Choose your words carefully. Even when we mean well, we can sometimes come across as harsh because of our word choices. So for example, using you could sound like you're blaming the other person, which will make them feel defensive and less receptive to your message. Instead, try to use I or we. So for example, when corresponding with a supervisor unsuccessfully on email, instead of saying, I feel like you're not understanding me, you're not understanding me, can we meet later to talk about it? Instead, say something like, I feel like, sorry, my apologies. Instead of saying, I feel like we're not understanding each other, can we meet and talk later? That would be the correct way to say it. Instead of saying, I feel like you don't understand what I'm saying. And let me know if you could see the difference over there. The next is be honest. Make a commitment to be honest to yourself and to the other person. Even though sometimes the truth can be unpleasant to hear, it'll be more productive if you are honest. It could be hard, but this could be hard, but try to stick to the subject of what the conversation is about in order to have better outcomes in the workplace. Look inside yourself. Ask yourself, what are the motives behind your words that you chose to bring into this conversation? Are you trying to defend yourself, distract yourself, protect the feelings of others? Are you trying to really communicate effectively? And then the final one is check your body language. And we're going to talk about this later. Give the other party your full attention. Sit up, face them, and make comfortable eye contact when speaking. Show the person you're talking to them that you respect them, you're listening, and you're interested in what they're saying. So we just touched on nonverbal communication. I'm going to talk more about that. What is nonverbal communication? So it could be defined as a whole set of physical and nonverbal cues that convey emotions, state of mind, and they complement verbal messages. Nonverbal humans communicate nonverbally, and this involves different parts of our body. It can either be conscious or subconscious in different scenarios. And then we know of 8 different types of nonverbal communication. First one is body movement, more specifically gestures and symbols. These includes deliberate gestures such as head movements for affirmation or a head shake, thumbs up, or a simple wave for hello. Of course, we know that different cultures across the world interpret these gestures very differently. So example I could think of is I'm from Israel. I was born and raised there. And in Israel, and we do this. This means give me 1 second. It's a very accepted gesture that people do. And let's say you walk into the doctor's office. Is he on the phone? This is another one. He's on the phone. He'll just do this. That means just give me 1 second. I'll be right with you. I know that in Italy, that same symbol can be translated very differently, and it's considered rude. So that's something to consider when practicing body language or reading body language. Next one is proxemics, closeness, personal space. This is a measure of distance between people when they communicate. The standard amount of personal space expected by someone varies depending on the situation and, again, culture. Next one is posture. The way that we sit or stand, how we open our body to others around us, communicates a lot about our attitudes and emotions in that situation. Next one is eye contact. This is one of the primary ways that human beings engage and gauge interest or disinterest. Waving eyes tends to communicate unease or even dishonesty. And this also, again, I have an example. I had a professor, he was from Nigeria. And he told us in class that growing up, making eye contact with your superior or an adult is a sign of disrespect. Whereas here we know that if I am not making eye contact with my boss, for example, it's considered as disrespectful. So that's, again, something that's important to consider depending on the culture and context that you're in. Next one is touch. Many instances will begin, many interactions will begin with an exchange of physical touch, like a handshake or hug. Of course, today in COVID world, these are things that we need to reconsider and kind of relearn again how to interact with. Next one is paralanguage. This category covers vocal qualities like loudness, tone of voice, and things like that. Next one is facial expressions. Pretty obvious. Facial expressions are, again, one of the main indicators of someone's attitude and emotions in a situation. Again, culture will determine and I guess have different meanings to different facial expressions, depends on the culture. And then the last one is physiology. This category includes changes in body physiology, like increase in sweat, blinking rapidly, blushing, and things like that. A little harder to control, but with time and practice, it is, like I mentioned earlier, me breaking sweat whenever I used to talk to someone who was older than me. With time, I was able to get over that, and I think you can too. So for the next slide, we're talking about the benefits of understanding nonverbal communication and why it's important. So the first one is to show interest. Nonverbal signals are a great way to communicate attentiveness and engagement to those around us. Controlling your posture and eye contact will demonstrate to others that you're interested in what they have to say. Also, to convey specific meaning. Many words have multiple different meanings, and the things we say can often be misread. Learning how to complement your words with nonverbal communication can prevent misunderstandings and miscommunications. Next one is to establish communication. To establish connection. Nonverbal communication is a great way to establish connections. And the truth is that it's not an accident that many cultures see some sort of physical gesture, like a handshake or a hug, as necessary in certain types of personal interaction. And then the last one is to demonstrate authenticity. Your nonverbal communication goes a long way in establishing authenticity. Authenticity of your feelings and your thoughts about a subject, and complementing your actual words with a direct eye contact, confident posture will demonstrate that you are giving voice to your true feelings. So these are some tips, and we're gonna change subject after this, but these are some tips for understanding nonverbal communication. Like I said before, some people it comes more naturally to read nonverbal communication, and some struggle with it. So these are some tips for that. Look for inconsistencies. Knowing how to spot signs of nervousness, like fidgeting or eye movement, is a great way to determine whether a person you're speaking with is trustworthy or what kind of state of mind they're in. If nonverbal behavior seems to run counter to verbal messagings, it's likely that either the person is in distress or there's something else to try to consider about that interaction. Be conscious of cultural differences. It's important to be aware of the differences, mannerisms or physical gestures that are common in different cultures. Nonverbal interpersonal communication varies around the world, like we said earlier. So don't have into judging the nonverbal cues and picking out different things from it. It's important to, I guess, to first of all look at the interaction holistically, and also look more into the culture of the person that you're talking to. come from a place of curiosity in that sense. Observe
Ami,
not, yes.
we've got a question. Declan?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, yeah, I was wondering when it's appropriate to ask about someone's culture, especially for instance, to give a personal example, my boss for my internship last summer was Indian, but or he I or you know, he came from India. But I didn't know where in India or what language he spoke, or you know, Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu, whatever. I didn't know how like things that I said would be perceived, but I was also not comfortable asking him necessarily about, like, what kind of Indian are you, or what's your like cultural traditions, because I didn't want to be perceived as racist or inconsiderate.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're actually, it's a great segue into my next point, but I think it really depends on the situation. Yeah, in my opinion, if you come from a place of curiosity and authenticity, I think most times people would appreciate that. Um, I guess also something to watch out for is not assuming things or not conveying microaggressions that might impose your opinions or notions, preconceived notions about a certain culture. Is something that I would watch for. But Kristen, do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Declan. Yeah, I think just to echo Ami there, it's just important, I think, to be curious and just have a, open stance in how you ask someone as well. So if you were to ask your boss, hey, I would love to know more about where you're from. Can you tell me more about that? Right? Therefore, you're just kind of leaving it open to what they want to share with you and what their comfort level is. And then they can disclose what is appropriate for their level of comfort with that. Right? So it never hurts, I think, just to even ask and to have that curious question of, hey, I'd just love to know more about you. Would you share your background a little bit with me? Kind of open stance. Yeah, but that's a great question, Declan.
Yeah. And like I said, this is a segue to the last point I was going to add to this, but before that, I'm going to say this: observing nonverbal signals holistically is important. I think also connects to what we're talking about. Important to observe a variety of nonverbal cues that are being communicated to you. Just because someone is sweaty doesn't mean that they're nervous, something like that. Similarly, a twitch doesn't mean necessarily that someone is, again, nervous or lying or anything like that. It could be an unconscious tick. So the last point relates to your question. If in doubt, ask. Sometimes it's difficult to understand someone's nonverbal language, depending on the scenario or even their culture, and even based on my own individual skills of reading someone's body language. So if you're not sure, it's okay to ask someone something like, hey, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong. I see that you're fidgeting your leg and you seem uncomfortable when I was talking about the upcoming project. Are you nervous about it? So you see, first of all, I started with saying, correct me if I'm wrong, just to make sure that the other person understands that I'm not sure and I'm not making assumptions, but I would like, the person's input about what I'm inquiring about. If you're genuine and your intent is coming from a place of constructive support or curiosity, employers and colleagues will usually appreciate authenticity.
Sorry about that, I was on mute. So yeah, we're gonna now just gonna jump into talking about active listening. And so we wanted to just kind of get your responses to this first question. If you just want to type it in the chat, that would be great. When people are talking, why do you think they're looking for someone to talk to? Why do you think people seek someone to talk to? What might be your guesses on that, or your experiences? Feel free. Thank you, Spencer. Yeah, validation, external processing, camaraderie, or commisery, absolutely. People like talking to people, yep, right? People like just conversing, especially right in this time that we're in now, right? It's nice to talk to people when we're on Zoom all the time. They want to put their point of view forward, yeah, to have someone else hear what they are thinking of, to share experiences, to bond with a person, yeah, absolutely. They have something they want to share. They want advice or support, absolutely, too. Yeah, and to deliver a thought, absolutely, right? People seek a listener because they want to be listened to, right? You all captured that very well. What helps you feel listened to? So when you're talking with someone, what helps you know that that person is actually listening to you? Feel free to drop that in the chat as well. Not looking at their phone over and over again, absolutely, right? That's the worst, when someone is, you're right, head down, being like, and like scrolling, and you know that they're like on Instagram. That's not great. Eye contact, yeah. Head nods, right? Some kind of that body language, that gesturing. Hey, I'm tracking with what you're saying. Absolutely. Yeah, enthusiasm, right? Showing that you care by the tone of your voice, making eye contact, asking questions, follow-up questions. Excellent. Head nods again. Yeah, they nod their head. Yeah. Or repeating back, like summary, reflecting, like Spencer just said. What I heard you said was, and these are all awesome. Yeah, paraphrasing. Again, yeah, eye contact is huge, right? It's hard to sometimes talk with someone, feel like they're tracking with you if they're not looking at you. Absolutely. So we're gonna, I'm just gonna chat now too about how do you practice active listening in the workplace? So what does that look like?
Yeah, so just as you're looking at the visual here, I'm just going to go over that. The first step will be to, and a lot of you already mentioned this in the chat, which is amazing. That you guys already have quite a good idea about this. So the first step will be to reflect back what the person said. Someone already wrote this in the chat, this example. It sounds like you're saying X, Y, and Z. You've experienced a lack of communication with the management and you're frustrated. So a good way to, that's a good way to reflect back to someone, just to make sure that you're really understanding what they're saying, which leads us to the next point, clarifying. You want to clarify to ensure that you're understanding. Am I understanding you correctly? That you want me to do X, Y, and Z? And I think this also goes back to your question earlier about cultures. This is a great way to make sure that you are on the same page, and that if there are mixed messages or gestures or phrases that in your culture would mean a different thing and it doesn't really fit the conversation, this is a great way to kind of reflect back on that and clarify what the meaning is. The next step will be to show support, reassure and support the other person. For example, how else can I support you, or the team? What do you need from me to complete this task? And of course, the last one, follow up. This is later on to kind of solidify that everything that you communicate in the beginning is being supported. Discuss how you're going to communicate going forward, saying something like, when would be a good time to check back in about a certain project, for example, or feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions in the future, just to clarify things later down the road. And then I guess this is a summary of what we talked about. These are just 3 easy steps to remember to practice active listening. The first one is nonverbal cues, like we said, noticing facial cues, cadence, tone, nonverbal gestures, and appearances. Next step is verbal cues. Affirm your listening and how you respond. use nonverbal gestures to be mindful of your own tone. And then the third one is staying present. And I see again, someone mentioned that in something related to that in the chat. Focus on what the other person is saying, and try not to focus on how you want to respond, or looking at your phone, or trying not to think about the next thing you have on your schedule, was admittedly sometimes could be easier than said.
Great, thanks, Ami. So, right, the practice active listening and doing our nonverbals are all great things, but what happens when barriers come up to being that good listener that we all strive to be, right? So share in the chat. Oh, I love it. You're already on it. Awkwardness is a barrier. Yep. So feel free to put in the chat, what do you think is a barrier to you being a good listener, or to anybody being a good listener? So we've got awkwardness, language differences. Yep, absolutely. Eagerness to speak your own opinion, to want to get out what you want to be heard, right? If someone else is using an aggressive tone, yeah, that can be a barrier to having them hear you, hear what you're saying. You feel like they probably aren't listening. If maybe they're in a heightened state, or if you are in a heightened state, right? You're probably not listening as well. Other real life distractions, absolutely. Yeah, what's going on around you? Do you need to be somewhere? Yeah, these are all excellent. So, right, externally, tired and bored. Thank you for, yeah, those are great things. Because, right, to think about, we have external factors that play into a conversation that we're having. If we need to be somewhere, if we have an upcoming meeting, or if we have a deadline that we need to get to, it can be easy to not be present, right? Like that last slide was talking about, showing signs of needing to leave, looking at our watch, looking at the clock, looking at our phone. Or perhaps it's internal, right? That your own wandering mind, you are maybe thinking about this person you're talking to, making a judgment about what they're saying. Or maybe you want to just jump and solve the problem. You don't really want to listen to the whole scenario that's going on, and you just want to get to the chase, right? So you kind of throw out a way to solve it. Or perhaps you were dismissed in how you were feeling when you were talking to someone, and so you didn't feel listened to, so then that might shut you down and how you're listening to them, right? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Kristen, we have a question from Declan.
Oh, great.
Another question.
Yeah.
Yep. So the first one I said was awkwardness is one of the barriers to being a good listener. So for instance, if someone is a non-native English speaker and it's difficult to understand their accent,
Yeah.
I feel awkward like asking them to repeat themselves multiple times. And I feel like that could be perceived as rude. So I just wanted to know what's a better way to go about that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question as well. Declan, I think absolutely it's okay to let someone know. It's better to let someone know that you maybe can't understand them or what they had said than to pretend that you did, right? And so I think it can be good to, right, to say, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, do you mind repeating what you said? I didn't catch it. And then if you don't understand it again, say, oh, one more time, sorry, I'm having a hard time catching that, right? And then if you don't understand it again, you could always ask them, hey, could you maybe say that in a different way for me? That way I can you can have a different context to what they're saying and maybe piece it together a little bit more. So those could be some solutions. I'd love to hear if there are any other thoughts out there as well from Ami or anybody, but that would be kind of my first thought. That's a really great question in a real life situation that happens, right?
Yeah, I encountered that situation where I was a person trying to speak another language. I was trying to speak Spanish. I was in Central America. And I was asking, this is years ago, I can't remember what it was. I was asking how to get to a bus stop, I think. And they had no idea what I was saying. And I ended up pulling out my phone and just typing in what I was trying to say. And it was like, oh, okay. And then they helped me out. So I guess that's just a way that we got creative at the moment to do. But I definitely agree with Kristen where, again, if you're coming from a genuine place, you're not trying to be offensive. You're simply trying to make that connection and trying to make that understanding of what the other person is trying to communicate, I think it's absolutely okay just to be honest and sincere, and watch your tone and body language when you do this, and just really you know, I think it's more important to try to get the actual communication instead of worrying about getting frustrated. And it can be frustrating when someone says something and they don't hear you, they don't hear you, they don't hear you. Or, and I experienced that just because I'm not very good with hearing. My hearing is not very good. So when a lot of times people talk to me and say something in a loud environment, and I have to ask them like multiple times, and I know it's not very pleasant, but I'd rather know what they're telling me and rather make that connection with that person.
Yeah, there was that's great, Ami, too. And I think we had some people share in the chat as well. It looks like Declan, you saw that as well, but for everyone else to see, right, just you can ask that person to slow down their speed of talking. I think that was a great suggestion. And then, you know, it was also said, you know, conveying that that you're maybe not used to their accent, and that I really care about what you're sharing and want to be sure that I understand, right? Being really clear about what your intentions are. Those are really great suggestions. Thanks, everyone.
I like that one. Really, just saying, I really want to understand what you're saying. You know, showing your true intent and your honest intent, I think, is a critical part in that scenario.
And
Right.
Manisha has a raised hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm from India. So that kind of questions I always get. So in my opinion, I could be wrong. So if anybody is asking me, say that again, what was that? If it is multiple times, I might feel bad.
Mm.
So instead of that, if anybody can say, oh, I'm not used to the non-native speakers. So if anybody says, I'm sorry, can you repeat it? I'm not used to this and that, and then say, don't feel bad about this. So it means you are saying your part, but you are not thinking about the person in front of you. What will they think about you? So what are they going through? So if you say, oh, don't feel that, this is my I'm not used to this, so that will soften that opposite person's like mentality or whatever I'm not using proper word here, but this is my 2 cents. Yeah, I don't know, I'm right or wrong.
Thank you
So
much
you're
for
saying that when people ask you multiple times to repeat yourself, then that makes you feel kind of bad?
So sometimes I think, oh, so the way, if you are politely saying, that makes sense, but sometimes they are very, and the way of the tone or way of telling, sometimes anybody can feel that, not me, maybe any other people can feel bad.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. I think that's really important for us to know and to own our own piece in that, and to say, this is my fault. I'm the one having the issue. Please don't feel bad. And saying that out loud, I really appreciate that. That's really great.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that. So next we're going to talk about some tips to communicate when elevated. This means when we're angry, frustrated with someone, afraid, excited, disappointed, you know, and the list could go on and on. So these might sound simple, but these are just additional reminders for us to about how to communicate and how to handle ourselves. So our first one is stop. If you get angry about something or elevated in a certain way, stop, take a deep breath, tell the other party. Sometimes it might be helpful to tell the other party that you'd like to take a short break before continuing the conversation. Give yourself time to calm down by listening to a song you like, talking to a friend, a coworker, practice mindful breathing, taking a walk, or you all are the experts of yourselves. You know what is about you that, or what activities make you calm, what activities help you recenter, and really explore that. And then, of course, taking a deep breath, taking a break from a situation can really help from preventing escalation in that situation. Next one is think. After settling down, reflect on the situation and why you got angry, or why you were frustrated, or why you were elevated. And ask yourself, be genuine with yourself. Ask yourself, is it because of how the person spoke to me? Is it something that happened to me earlier in the day before I came into work? Really try to figure out what the real problem is, and what brought you to that state of mind and state of being elevated. Next step is talk, communicate with the other party. The silent treatment usually doesn't get us very far. So express your thoughts and feelings in a way that's genuine and coming from a place that's not, I guess, malicious. Again, we could talk about or reflect back on our body language, making sure that our body language is reflecting our true emotion or our true intent. And it could be helpful to follow the tips we spoke about in increasing communication as well. And then the last step is listen. Remember to stop talking and listen to what the other person has to say. You both deserve the opportunity to express how you feel in a safe and healthy environment. Yes.
We have a raised hand from Akshatha.
Yeah, so I was just curious to know if you are really upset about what the other person is saying, but you don't have the time to stop, think, and all that. But what do you do in that instance?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, as I was preparing for this presentation, I was looking at these and thinking, let's say in the workday, there's not always realistically the time to do these things, not all the time. But I think communicating with the other person that you're in front of, listen, I'm really upset right now. How can we find a way to get past this? I think if let's say, for example, you're working on a project, you're very stressed out, your coworker is demanding a lot from you. I think, expressing that, first of all, will get the awkwardness of not understanding each other and what's going on and why you're behaving or why you're appearing a certain way. I think I reduce the stress. And I think also taking a step back from talking and expressing yourself, and rather listening to what the other person has to say about the situation could be a good tip. And of course, in different situations, the tips and the right way to go about things might be very different, and it depends a lot. And I was wondering if anyone else had any kind of suggestions about that.
I think what you shared, someone also shared it in the chat, how can we handle if we're on the receiving end of this? And so I think it can be a similar thing is, right, if you're on the receiving end of someone being angry or frustrated towards you, is really, right, taking a stance of more listening, but just trying to stop and slow down, try to slow down the conversation. And when you're in that state as well, I think just slowing down can be a really great way, right, not to escalate things even further in the moment. All right, should we go on to stress and impact? I know we're getting a little close on time, so we want to get through some of these slides and get to our activities. So I think we can kind of, go through these slides maybe a little bit quick on these ones. So Ami, if you want to talk about this piece as well.
Okay. Yeah, so just to acknowledge that when we're stressed, it can really impact our communication and state of mind. We could have also trouble choosing the words that we would like to use in an ideal situation. And it's just an acknowledgement that stress does impact our communication. And it could also cause us to behave in a way that isolates ourselves. And also, it's easier to have misunderstandings when these emotions happen in our bodies and in our minds, because it kind of, you feel a little bit confused sometimes. I do when I'm stressed out. Things seem a little more jumbly and a little harder to focus. So these are some physical symptoms of stress. We know that when people are stressed, they could experience upset stomachs, muscle aches and pains, sleep disturbances, loss of energy, nervousness, shaking. It lowers our immune system. We could experience a dry mouth, like I'm experiencing right now as I'm presenting. Clenched jaw and grinding teeth, hyperventilating and sweating. And then our emotions can also be impacted stress. Of course, our minds and body are connected, so one thing can impact the other. We could experience moody and irritable state of minds, low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, avoiding people, being isolating, self-isolating, feeling of overwhelming and excessive worry.
Awesome. Yeah, I think someone else said dry mouth happens to me too, and me. We're all in the same boat, people. Yeah, so with some quick tips on how to manage stress, right? So we just talked about physical, emotional stress, how that can show up. It's obviously a barrier in how we communicate. So what can we do, right, to manage that stress? So first, sometimes just identifying the cause of stress can be a game changer, right? Once we understand what is causing it, then we can manage it, right? So sometimes just naming, and then there are times where you don't even know what the stress trigger was, but you're just experiencing all those physical stressors, right, that's happening. And so even just naming it and saying, wow, I'm really stressed out right now, or I must be really nervous right now, or I'm having a lot of anxiety. Then if we name it, we actually give less power to it, and then we can start to manage it. And then once you can identify that trigger, right, then you can do things around that trigger that if that's coming, you can help then mitigate that and see that coming. It's not a shock to you. And then increasing communication. So communicating in your academic and work environments is just integral to creating a healthy work environment. So if you are stressed or you might be coming across a certain way, if you just name that to the person you're with, if they're a person that you trust, that you feel comfortable doing that with, it can be just helpful to increase your communication around it with those around you, as well as talking to friends, family, loved ones about that level of stress you're experiencing. And the last thing to think about is just, what in your life makes you happy, brings you calmness, brings you joy, right? Those are just natural stress relievers, those healthy activities. And so it's right, you probably all know this, that physical activity really can help improve and your quality of life and relieve stress and tension, anxiety, depression. And you might feel that feel-good sensation after maybe you work out. And so physical activity can be huge in managing your stress. And also things like getting enough sleep, right? Eating well, eating 3 meals a day, or snacking throughout the day to make sure you have enough, nutrients in your body, meditating, and then just engaging in your hobbies as well. Another really great way to manage stress, honestly, it sounds so simple, but it's just breathing. It can be as simple as just and that's when you're stopping, you say, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths right now. You can use this visual here to sit or stand with your elbows slightly back against a chair. You can take a deep inhale and then you hold it, and then you can release that and exhale, right? You can practice that right now as we're sitting here doing it. It takes about 10 seconds to do a breath. So that's always just a good reminder, a way, just breathe when you feel like you're in that situation. All right, and so we're going to talk about boundaries now, and we're going to get into some fun things, some ways for you to interact. So what are boundaries? Gosh, we're the experts on ourselves, and so we know what our values are, what our needs are, what our wants are. So setting boundaries is a really healthy way to protect the values as we our own values as we communicate with others. It's a way of showing respect to ourselves and a way to be assertive to others in a really, really healthy manner. So it's important to tell others how we want to be treated and spoken to, as well as to tell others what we expect of them, right? So what are some unhealthy and healthy boundaries potentially in the workplace? I'm gonna go over that. So first, an unhealthy boundary might be going against something that you have a personal value on, or that going against something that is, pleasing to another person but isn't pleasing to you, right? Whereas a healthy boundary is being able to maintain your personal values despite what others want from you. So you might get in a situation in the workplace where someone asks something of you that really invades a personal boundary, and you might have to hold the line on that and communicate that to them. Unhealthy boundary is allowing someone to take as much as they want from you, whereas a healthy one is identifying and speaking up when someone invades your boundary to let them know. Unhealthy is believing others can anticipate your needs. A healthy boundary is recognizing that colleagues and supervisors can't always read your mind, right? And so you need to communicate directly to them what those boundaries are. And expecting others to fulfill your needs, right? Whereas it's your role and having healthy boundaries to communicate what your reasonable expectations of somebody else are. So there are times in the workplace that we need to say no, and that will happen. And it can be awkward to say no to somebody, and no to say no to a coworker, I can't do that, or to a boss or a supervisor, or someone who maybe has had more tenure there at this place of work than you, and it feels uncomfortable, right? So sometimes what we'll do is we kind of hide from saying no. So we might ignore an email, and ignoring the email is probably far worse than actually just politely and professionally telling someone no, right? Then it's out in limbo and they don't know where you stand on it. So we're going to talk about how to politely and professionally say no and what that looks like. It can be great. So this first piece is start with a positive. Wow, thanks so much for asking me to do X, Y, and Z. This sounds like a really interesting project. Wow, this project's super exciting. Now, that's how I might say that, because I can tend to be pretty excited when I talk in general. You might not be super excited when you talk all the time like me, and that's okay, but you can put your personal spin on it. But putting a positive, starting off with a positive, thanks so much for asking me to do this, and then following it up, right? And naming your limit. So you need to set a boundary and you need to name your limit. So considering, do I have time to do this? Is it my job? Is it my responsibility? Is somebody else actually in charge of this? What does your gut feeling say on what boundary you need to hold? And then be direct and clear, right? It's very important to clearly state, no, I can't do this, and be clear about that. You don't want someone walking away being like, I don't know about that, or I didn't know what they really said or what they can do. And then explain your why. So you don't have to go into a crazy long, lengthy detail about why you're doing something, but giving a really long explanation, but giving them a brief explanation can help give them context as to why this isn't working for you. And then if appropriate, maybe follow up on it. So, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do this right now. I've just got too much on my plate. I'd love to hear how it goes though. Will you loop me back in 2 weeks? I'd love to follow up on it. Something like that could work as well. So I want you, we're going to use this annotate feature right now in Zoom. So if you go to, I'm going to get this direction up here. So in your bar for Zoom, if you go to view options and then click on the third option of annotate and then stamps and pick a heart or a star. And I want you to practice on the screen right now and just stamp anywhere on the screen. Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Great. Jessica, great. You finding that, everyone? Yeah. Oops, there, I just drew a line by accident. Sorry about that. Okay, do we have are people getting the annotation? How do you do it on the mobile? That is a good question. I do not know.
Yeah, I'm on a MacBook. I can't do it.
Oh, bummer. Okay. Well, here, we'll go for it, and you can write your responses in the chat too. Okay, thanks. And you can annotate if you can. So here's a scenario. A colleague actually take on a project. Although you're very interested, you don't have the time to take it on. What's the best response of how to say no? So this project sounds very interesting. I wish I could jump on board, but currently I don't have the bandwidth to take on this project right now. Keep you posted on how it all goes. Thanks for thinking of me for this project. However, I'm going to have to turn this down. Or sadly, I'm afraid I can't help with this project this time. However, let's touch base next month if this is still something you need assistance with. I might have some more time then. Let's be in touch. So yeah, feel free wherever you feel like you want to annotate. First, someone says first option. Okay, yeah, first option. And then the third option. People like that option as well. Okay, so you know, honestly, these are all pretty good responses and professional responses. Probably the best one, I would agree, would be the first or the third, depending on how you speak, what feels comfortable to you. And that third option leaves the door open, right? Says, hey, maybe this is something I can do. So you're not being actually super clear that you can't do it. You're leaving the door open. So be mindful if that's something you want to do. But that first option as well leaves them with that positive, lets them know a little bit why you don't have the bandwidth, but you'd be interested to follow up as well. So all good responses, but great, maybe that first or third. Okay, so let me clear all those up. Okay, we're coming, I'm gonna actually skip forward a little bit. Sorry about that. And we're gonna skip this one. This one is just how to say no in an email. I'm just gonna show you right here. The best way to say no in an email to your boss, if your boss is asking, and you say, I don't know if I can do that, could just be to ask your supervisor, hey, I have all these other things on my plate that we talked about. What do you think is the best thing for me to prioritize right now? Right? Check back in with your boss. If they're asking for more things to be added, but you know it's not realistic, how can you put that in writing to them to say, hey, I've got all these other things. Let me show you. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to prioritize first? Okay. So, Ami, I think we should go ahead and move to our breakout room scenario. And we're going to spend the last, let's see, about, I say 5 minutes or so with this breakout scenario.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to read this scenario real quick. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. I just want to ask, when you get to a breakout room, try to establish quickly who's going to come out and share what was discussed in the breakout room. And Kristen, if you could remember to copy this into the chat, that would be great. So I'm going to read this out real quick. Let me get this a little larger. All right, so Howard is a recent hire from at a major engineering firm in Seattle, Washington. One morning on his way to work, Howard and his fiancée got into an argument over the phone. Shortly after arriving at his desk, Howard was approached by his coworker, Sally, who had a series of questions to ask him a series of questions and tasks for him to complete for the upcoming project that they're collaborating on. Howard, who was still flustered about his previous argument, answered Sally in agreement with an uncharacteristic monotone voice and flat facial expressions to avoid carrying his anger into the workplace and to end the interaction as soon as possible. Although Howard did not have the time to complete the tasks Sally asked him to take on, he agreed to them because he's a new employee who did not want to disappoint his colleagues. And he figured he could stay late after work to finish the newly assigned tasks. Howard now felt frustrated, annoyed, and like he wasn't living up to anyone's expectations. When Sally returned to her desk, she thought to herself, Howard was being very rude. Why is he acting like this? Did I do something to upset him? We usually get along so well.
All right, and here are the discussion questions. I'm having a hard time putting it into the chat, the scenario. So if you want to maybe take a screenshot with your phone or with your phone on the computer, you can do that as well so you can see those questions.
I'll put it in the chat right now.
Thanks. I don't know why mine's not, it won't let me paste it. Ah, awesome, thank you. All right, so we'll go to our breakout rooms and we'll spend,
Can you paste the discussion questions too? Sorry.
I got it. Thank you for bringing that up. I noticed now I didn't do all of it. You get them? Yep.
There they are.
Okay, we'll just do a few minutes in the breakout room, I think.
And come back so we can do a wrap up at the end. But right
Yes.
now I'll open the rooms.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you all, yeah, so much. Let me fast forward here, just some references for you if you wanted to screenshot that or just look at some of those sources that we used today to talk through interpersonal communication in the workplace. And here's our contact information as well. You can also visit our website, minds.edu/counseling-center. And just to kind of promote something coming up that you're going to see on campus, if you're on campus on the 22nd, 23rd, it's our Stick It to Stigma event happening out in the Maple Plaza. And you can come add your own sticky note on what you do to keep your mental health up and help finish a mural we're putting on the brown window. All right, so thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back over to Wendy. Oh, thanks, Ami, for putting that in the chat as well.
Thank you, Ami and Kristen. This is just so helpful and perfect. It fits really well with the CEO roundtable that was last month, where the CEOs said one of the biggest skills to learn is active listening. So we covered that really well. And we appreciate all your insights. And we thank Scott Irvine and Fran Viejo for making this possible. We have 2 more in our communication series next week, the 20th at 5 o'clock. Professional communication through email, and on the 22nd at noon is writing reports in the workplace. So thank you all, and watch for a survey to come. And also, if it's okay with Ami and Kristen, I'll share your slides as well. Thanks.